The wedding night. It's supposed to be the intimate, blissful start to a lifelong journey together. After the vows, the celebration, and the grand send-off, it's a moment of quiet connection, the first night of the rest of your lives. But for some couples, that night is not a beginning, but a brutal, shocking, and often stupidly tragic end. Tonight, we're looking at the stories of newlyweds whose wedding night became their last, exploring the fatal mistakes and bizarre twists of fate that turned matrimonial bliss into a final, horrifying memory. Case 1. The Deadly Send-Off. On April 28, 2023, Samantha Miller and Arik Hutchinson were on top of the world. They had just gotten married in a beautiful ceremony in Folly Beach, South Carolina, and were leaving their reception. A perfect end to a perfect day. Their chosen getaway vehicle was a golf cart, a charming and popular way to make a grand exit in the beach town. As they rode off into the night, still in their wedding attire, they were the picture of happiness. But just moments later, that picture was shattered in the most violent way imaginable. A drunk driver, 27-year-old Jamie Lee Komorowski, was speeding down the road at 65 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone. Her blood alcohol level was more than 3 times the legal limit. She slammed her car into the back of the golf cart, destroying it instantly. Samantha was killed on impact, her life cut short just hours after she had said, "I do." Arik was critically injured, suffering from a brain injury and multiple broken bones. The dream of a long and happy life together was obliterated in a senseless act of extreme recklessness. The aftermath was a long and painful journey for the families involved. In December 2024, Jamie Lee Komorowski pleaded guilty to felony DUI causing death and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. The groom, Arik, eventually accepted a settlement, but no amount of money could ever bring back his bride. The story is a brutal reminder of the devastating consequences of drunk driving, a stupid, selfish choice that turned a wedding night into a funeral. Case 2. The groom's last ride. For 25-year-old Kaylee Dobson, her wedding day on December 29, 2013, should have been the start of a new chapter. She had just married Ryan Quinton in a joyful ceremony in Georgia. As they left their reception, they hopped into Ryan's Pontiac Firebird sports car, ready to speed off into their new life. But the groom's idea of a celebratory exit was a reckless and ultimately fatal one. According to prosecutors, Ryan was driving erratically, laying drags and weaving on the road. He later claimed he swerved to avoid a dog, but the evidence pointed to a man who was driving under the influence and showing off. He lost control of the powerful car, and it flipped violently. Kylie, who was not wearing a seatbelt, was thrown from the vehicle. In a horrifying twist, the car then landed on top of her, crushing her to death. Her new husband, who survived the crash, was charged with a litany of offenses, including vehicular homicide and DUI. The man who was supposed to be her protector had become her killer, all because of a stupid, macho display of reckless driving on their wedding night. Ryan Quinton was eventually sentenced to 15 years of probation, a sentence that many felt was far too lenient for the life he had taken. The tragedy serves as a chilling example of how a wedding celebration, fueled by alcohol and poor judgment, can lead to a completely avoidable and utterly devastating end. Case 3. The prenup argument. For Dr. George Scott Sampson, an anesthesiologist, and Kelly Ecker, a nurse, their wedding day in Indiana was supposed to be a joyous occasion. But beneath the surface of the celebration, a dark and bitter conflict was brewing. The couple had reportedly been arguing over the details of a prenuptial agreement, a dispute that had started during the ceremony itself and continued to fester throughout the reception. After the party, they invited a few guests back to their home, but the argument escalated, spilling out in front of their friends. The atmosphere became so toxic and uncomfortable that the guests quickly made their excuses and left, leaving the newlyweds alone to sort out their differences. But once the guests were gone, the argument turned violent. A terrified Kelly Ecker made a series of frantic 911 calls. In the first, she reported that her new husband was beating her. In a subsequent call, she screamed that there were guns in the house. By the time police arrived, it was too late. They found both George and Kelly dead in their home. The investigation revealed a shocking murder-suicide. George Sampson, in a fit of rage, had shot his new wife to death before turning the gun on himself. Their wedding night, which should have been a celebration of their union, became a bloody and tragic testament to a relationship that was fatally flawed from the very beginning. The prenuptial agreement, a document designed to protect their assets, had instead become the catalyst for their destruction. Case 4. The glass in the pocket. Sometimes the stupidest deaths are the result of a bizarre and unlikely chain of events, a perfect storm of bad luck and a seemingly minor bad decision. Such was the case for Fabio Jefferson Maciel, a 33-year-old Brazilian Navy sergeant, on his wedding night. He and his new wife, Geisa Guimarães, were celebrating with 200 guests at a lively beachfront reception. It was around 2 a.m., and the party was still going strong. Fabio was on the beach, playfully joking around with one of the bridesmaids. In a moment of light-hearted fun, he tripped and fell onto the sand. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a harmless, funny moment. But Fabio had made a small, thoughtless mistake earlier in the evening. He had slipped a beer glass into his trouser pocket. When he fell, the glass shattered, and a sharp shard pierced his femoral artery, one of the largest and most important blood vessels in the body. The wound was catastrophic. He began to bleed profusely, losing a massive amount of blood in a matter of seconds. Guests and his horrified new bride rushed to his side, but there was nothing they could do. He died before he could even be transported to a hospital. A joyous celebration had turned into a scene of horror, all because of a misplaced piece of glassware. His funeral was held just 3 days later, a somber and surreal end to a marriage that had lasted only a few short hours. Case 5. The Silent Killer. In November of 2017, a newlywed couple in Washington Township, Ohio, settled into their home for their first night as a married couple. Their house was quiet, a peaceful sanctuary after the excitement of their wedding day. They went to sleep, expecting to wake up to the first day of the rest of their lives together. But they never did. When they failed to contact family the next day, concerned relatives went to check on them. They entered the house to a scene of silent tragedy. The couple was found dead in their home, along with their dog. There were no signs of violence, no indication of a struggle. It was as if they had simply gone to sleep and never woken up. The cause of death was soon discovered to be carbon monoxide poisoning. A faulty appliance or a blocked vent had silently filled their home with the odorless, colorless gas as they slept. It's a stupidly simple and preventable way to die, a tragic reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk in our own homes. For this couple, the joy of their wedding night was followed by a quiet, creeping death that they never saw coming. Their story is a heartbreaking example of how a simple oversight, a failure to check a carbon monoxide detector or ensure proper ventilation, can have the most devastating consequences, turning a home that should have been a place of love and new beginnings into a tomb. Case 6. The Grand Entrance. Rosemary do Nascimento Silva, a bride in São Paulo, Brazil, wanted to make a grand entrance at her wedding. She decided to surprise her groom, Udirle Damasceno, by arriving at the ceremony in a helicopter. It was a dramatic, Hollywood-style gesture, a way to make her special day even more unforgettable. She even hired a photographer to capture the spectacular arrival from inside the helicopter. As the helicopter took off, just a few miles from the wedding venue, Rosemary was likely filled with excitement and anticipation, imagining the look on her groom's face when she descended from the sky. But her grand entrance would never happen. Just a mile from the venue, the helicopter encountered turbulence and began to shake violently. The recovered video footage from the photographer's camera captured the final panicked moments. The pilot can be heard telling the bride and photographer to remain calm, but the situation was out of his control. The helicopter plummeted from the sky, crashing into a forested area. Rosemary, the pilot, and the photographer were all killed instantly. Back at the wedding venue, Udirli Damasceno stood at the altar, waiting for his bride. Instead of seeing her arrive in a helicopter, he was given the devastating news that she was dead. A stupid, unnecessary stunt, a desire for a dramatic entrance, had turned a day of celebration into a day of mourning. The very thing that was meant to make her wedding spectacular had led to her death. Case 7. The Stalker's Disguise. For Gladys Ricart, her wedding day on September 26, 1999, was supposed to be a triumph. She was finally marrying the man she loved, leaving behind a painful past that included an obsessive and abusive ex-boyfriend, Agustin Garcia. As she prepared for the ceremony at her family's home in New Jersey, surrounded by her mother and her 20-year-old son, she was filled with hope. She had just handed the bouquets to her bridesmaids when the unthinkable happened. Agustin Garcia, dressed in a suit to blend in with the wedding guests, walked into the house, pulled out a handgun, and shot Gladys 3 times, killing her in front of her family. The act was a brutal and premeditated execution. Garcia had been stalking Gladys for weeks, consumed by a jealous rage that she was moving on with her life. His defense later argued that it was a momentary mistake, a crime of passion, but the court didn't buy it. He was sentenced to life in prison. The stupidity of this tragedy lies not in a single, foolish act, but in a system and a society that so often fails to protect women from obsessive and violent men. Gladys had done everything right. She had left her abuser, she was building a new life, and she was on the cusp of happiness. But her ex-boyfriend's toxic obsession, his refusal to let her go, led to a wedding day massacre. Her groom, waiting at the church for his bride, would never see her walk down the aisle. Case 8. The Premature Celebration. Hans Adrian Campbell, a Texas police officer, was in the Philippines to marry his fiancée, Crisalyn Bedolito. The day before their wedding, which was also Campbell's birthday, the couple decided to go for a celebratory dive with their family. It was a beautiful day, and the water was clear. They were in a designated safe diving area, a place where they should have been protected. But a stupid and reckless act by a speedboat driver turned their pre-wedding celebration into a tragedy. As Campbell surfaced from a dive, a speedboat that had wrongfully entered the safe zone sped directly over him, its propeller striking him in the head. The injury was catastrophic. Campbell was pulled from the water, bleeding profusely, and rushed to a nearby hospital. It was clear that he was not going to survive. In a heartbreaking and desperate attempt to fulfill their dream of getting married, the couple held a pre-mortem wedding ceremony in Campbell's hospital bed. Just hours after exchanging vows with his new wife, Hans Adrian Campbell died. A life full of promise was cut short by the reckless disregard of a boat driver. The wedding that should have been a joyous celebration of their love became a grim and tearful farewell. It was a stupid, senseless death that could have been easily prevented if safety rules had been followed, a tragic end to a love story that was just beginning. The wedding night is a powerful symbol of new beginnings, but for these couples, it was a final, tragic chapter. Their stories, a mix of shocking accidents, senseless violence, and just plain stupidity, are a stark reminder that life is unpredictable and often unforgiving. They highlight the devastating consequences of reckless choices and the cruel twists of fate that can turn a celebration of love into a memorial of loss. As we've seen, the promise of "till death do us part" can sometimes arrive with a brutal and unexpected speed.